Hey everybody, it's Allie, and welcome to our Y&R Chat for Sunday, April 15th, 2018. It's been 2 days since the Friday episode aired, and I feel like I'm still trying to process everything that we've seen, not just from Friday's show, but from the entire week and from the course of the last several months as we've gone along on this journey of Victoria and JT's relationship. I don't remember in the past several years a storyline that's really impacted me as much as this one has. I feel like I'm working through something here. It's just I've soaked it in so deeply, and it's, I think, a signal of a really great, well-told story. I feel like this has just been one of the best storylines that Y&R has told us in a very long time, and probably one of the more memorable ones since I've been watching the show for this 25 years, from top to bottom. The writing, the direction, even some of the camera work we've seen, the sets, certainly the acting. I just can't say enough good things about the way this was approached by Amelia Hindley as Victoria, Thad Luckenbill as JT. It's been character rich. And so in that way, I also just really have to give some credit to Mal Young, executive producer. And we've been very critical of him here. But the character-driven storylines that the fans have been asking for, that's here. That's this. Because even though a lot of the drama on Friday's show and the cliffhanger of Friday's show was action-based, my biggest takeaway and the thing I'm thinking about that's rolling around in my head at night after watching this week's of shows was really the way we took a deep dig into Victoria's character at the end of the week. This is a character that I've known since I've started watching the show, and really struggled to wrap my brain around what was happening to her. And it was incredible to really take the time and to listen to her dialogue and to finally get the chance to hear what's been going on in her head, realizing the truth of the situation, breaking free of JT's control of her, admitting how she was being abused, realizing the path of how it happened, why it happened, trusting that it did happen, and knowing that she could never let it happen again, ultimately coming to a point of strength. I thought that that was all so very excellent. I also have to say, I think that throughout, especially Thursday and Friday's show, we really had a chance to start to reconcile JT's character, the man that he was versus the man that he had become. And from a dramatic perspective, I think I should have realized much sooner that his path was not going to be recovery or any type of redemption as I had hoped for him, but most certainly death. I should have guessed that his trajectory was going to be death sooner than I did. If I had to name one flaw in this storyline, I think it would be the fact that JT is most certainly dead. I think killing JT is such a huge missed opportunity here, to really dig into his character and his mindset and who he was and what were the things that really led up to him being this way. It wasn't just a lost job and a lost relationship. Was there abuse in his past and his family? I just feel like there would have been so much more to that story And I think that it would have been fascinating to follow his recovery story. I mean, Y&R has done an incredible job of showing us what domestic violence looks like from the victim's end, where I think that there is a little bit of a gap, or maybe a missed opportunity would be to show us, the viewers, what does the recovery process look like for the abuser? What would have been a more realistic way to show JT moving forward and out of the situation we've seen him in? Killing him off washes our hands a little bit as viewers of some of the hardest work that would still need to be done, right? In real life, abusers don't just disappear. So I think in that way, I find it disappointing to know that I was watching this story, I was in this story, I was really impressed by the decision to use JT to tell this story. And I feel a little bit disappointed that, that we brought a character back from the past, someone we know, someone who wasn't just a short-term stint type of character, and now to know that he's gone and the story's over, I feel disappointed by that. So I want to know, does anybody else feel that way? Are you at all disappointed by Y&R's choice to kill JT? Are you disappointed by his death? Would you have liked to see more from him, the follow-ups to this story, or do you feel like this is where it had to end? YRChat.com. I'd love to get some conversation going specifically around JT this week, because of course we talked a lot and will focus a lot on Victoria, but I think this is our last opportunity to really dig into who JT was, and I wanted to know more. I just wanted to know more. From the beginning, I believe he was meant to be a villain, but I still don't think that Y&R really had a fully fleshed out idea of what they were going to do with him when he came on to the show. I still can't get over the fact that those pills were never addressed. The fact that he was popping pills. Was it related to a medical condition? Was it a drug addiction? Are we never going to know that? Is that never going to be resolved? That just, to me, will always be the signal that Y&R didn't quite know what they were going to do with him, but they were going to do something. I wonder now, in retrospect, if perhaps the storyline started to take shape around JT's real motive and his real path when we saw that scene at the coffee house of him tracing his finger along the old carved out heart of his name and Colleen's name that was left in the booth at Crimson Lights. I wonder if that was the moment, looking back, when JT's hatred for Victor was starting to consume him, and it's so much so that it allowed him to try to kill a dying man. The darkness in JT had become so dark, and it wasn't just directed at Victoria, it was very much directed at Victor. He tried to kill Victor, but of course Victor was saved by the bells. The doctors were able to rush in, save his life. He ended up having a minor stroke and he is unable to speak, but Victor is expected to make a full recovery. He is in the process of learning how to use a tablet to communicate, which has to be so very frustrating for the man. I also have to say, Eric Braeden was really giving an excellent performance, considering all he was doing was lying there in a hospital bed. His facial expressions, I could feel his desperation. It must be torture for him to have a mental awareness but not to be able to communicate, especially when his daughter is in such danger. And the scene where JT is confronting Victor and confessing to Victor, and it's an entirely one-sided conversation, and JT would put a pillow over Victor's face if there wasn't a police officer standing outside the door. It was incredibly acted, I think, by Eric Braeden and also by Thad Luckenbill. But since Victor was stubborn and decided not to die, that just created more desperation on JT's end. He can't just kill Victor. So now he realizes if Victor's going to recover, he's just a man on borrowed time. He could have chosen, though, to leave the country, to just up and go and disappear into the night, never to return. But I thought it was an interesting choice that JT decided, I'm not going to let Victor win. Why would I let Victor win now? I'm going to get Victoria. I'm going to have Victoria. I'm going to have at least my family. So JT decides to leak that memo. The memo that Victor had sent out to the entire company, or he had, I guess, drafted it. Let me revise that. He had drafted a memo that was supposed to be sent out to the entire company that announced Victoria's demotion, Ashley's promotion. It never went out because Victor went into the hospital, but JT was able to hack into Victor's tablet and actually send out that memo, effectively destroying Victoria's career, giving her no reason to want to stay in town. It further alienated her. It further made her dependent on him. And I thought, by the way, that it was very slick that when that memo came out, Victoria's humiliated, having to step down from Newman Enterprises, JT tried to pin it on Abby. There was a moment in the hospital where JT was hanging around Victor's hospital room, and Abby found that very suspicious, and she challenged him a little bit, and JT didn't like that. He didn't like being challenged. So when it came time to talk to Victoria about who would have leaked this memo, wasn't it interesting that he chose Abby? So I'll just point that in her direction. That was very, very slick. Well, he then creates the crisis to offer the solution, tells Victoria that they should just get out of town. There's nothing left here for them. So he suggests that they take the kids, go to Hawaii. He puts it all under the guise of a family vacation. And not only that, but he makes himself look like he's doing what their therapist, their counselor would have wanted. He just has this way of doing these terrible things and spinning it immediately to make it look like he's the good guy. I mean, it's no wonder really that Victoria kept falling for it, because he was very, very good at covering his tracks. When they arrived in Hawaii, though, it starts to become more clear. And we have to remember that Victoria's eyes were already opened by that counseling session a little bit. So she's on to him just a little bit. He gets to Hawaii, and again, under the guise of, let's just forget about life in Genoa City. Let's just forget about everything and try to have some fun, try to relax. He takes her cell phone and he locks it in a drawer. She can't access it, and he's making her feel like she's the wet blanket on a family vacation that's supposed to be fun. And he takes her aside and he's giving her a massage, and he's telling her, this is a great life. We got all the money we want. What more could we possibly need? I think we should just stay here in Hawaii. And he's serious. This is his plan. Get her to Hawaii under the guise of a vacation, and then do his magic to try to convince her to stay. And she's not biting on the idea at first. She's kind of uncomfortably entertaining him at first, but it's clear that she's starting to feel smothered. And the fact that he has no ability to acknowledge the closeness that she feels with her family is becoming a red flag to her. fine, all things are equal with business. She doesn't have a place to work in Genoa City. She still has her mother there. Her father is still in a hospital bed there, and he doesn't have enough empathy to understand that she might want to be close to that right now. It's becoming clear that he's isolating her to her. All the while trying to keep her away from her phone, saying she doesn't need it. She insists on having her phone. I think as she starts to realize this, not like the fact that he's trying to isolate her, she asks for her phone and he refuses. Now it's not just, hey, I'm trying to create a fun little moment here. Now it's pretty obvious that he's trying to control her. And while she's asking to have her phone, his phone rings in his pocket. So the fun that he's trying to preach and push off on her is not even being followed by him. I mean, that was the beginning of the end when she realized the truth of what it was that he was doing. She takes his phone and says, what is so important that you're going to do this to me, yet you're using your phone, sending text messages. So she takes it, she looks at his phone, she sees all of these text messages between JT and Paul. She puts together immediately that he's been working undercover for the police inside of her family company the entire time. She has a world of reasons to just walk out the door and never come back. And yet, again, JT is offering all of these excuses, these compelling excuses. I mean, he really did a scarily remarkable job at explaining himself, saying, yes, I was working undercover for the police, but I was doing it for you, not to you. I was working with Paul to try to keep the focus on Victor. I didn't have a choice. I was forced to take this position. And since I was in the position, I wanted to keep the focus on Victor, not on you, so that I could save you. Plus, Victoria, in your own best interest, I wanted to get you away from that company. That whole atmosphere, Victor, it's bad for you. How long are you just gonna let Victor use you as an emotional punching bag? Victor's using her as the emotional punching bag. I was so proud of her for not falling for it the way that she's fallen for it all of the other times. There's only so many times that a person can lie straight to your face to offer excuses for the lie before you start to realize it's all a lie. And she did. She realized it. She took off that engagement ring and told him, we're done. This is it. I want no more of you. I've had it. And he immediately is so childish about the whole thing. The way he said, okay, fine, well, you can leave me, but if you leave me, no matter how much you beg and how much you plead, I'm not taking you back. Fine. Okay, fine. She took the kids, she got on a plane, and she left his ass in Hawaii. I was so proud of her. That took just an incredible amount of strength, because it's not just the act of leaving him, it's the act of accepting that now you're going to have to try to move on with your life without him. You're going to have to try to pull together some kind of semblance of normality. And not only that, but she's having to do so carrying the weight of this secret, of everything that's just happened, and not really being able to tell anyone, just living with the truth of what she's been through. But she does. She goes back home and she really, really tries to get it together. She tries to rebuild her life and her family. She has to now explain to the little kids that she has why JT's not going to be living with them anymore. She's feeling, on top of everything else, like a horrible mother. She's introduced this man into her children's home, and she did so because she thought she knew him. Because she's been married to him before. She trusted him. He got a lot of leeway with her simply because they were married before. So now she feels like a failure of a mother, like she's in a sense maybe put her children into a level of danger, and that she's disappointing them by not giving them the life that she had promised. Reed really is not taking this information well. Reed has been through a lot. He's had a troubled youth. Now it's threatening to probably and possibly undo the closeness that she's developed with that son. So it really has become quite a mess of her personal life on top of the mess that JT created for her in her professional life. Victoria goes back to work where she's been humiliated. Ashley comes into her office waiting to pick up the feud right where it left off. And Victoria can hardly hold it together. She just bursts into tears right there in her office. And I found that to be such a human moment. Like, why do we always have to be bitches to each other? Why can't we just accept that we are intellectual equals, even if we're not business equals, and you're totally my subordinate, and we're gonna get back to the cat fighting next week? Receiving that support from Ashley, someone who she's engaged in an active feud with, was such an important kickoff for what was to come. I was so impressed with Sharon in all of this. Sharon is someone who had a little bit of a whiff that Victoria was going through a difficult time, and that she really didn't have a whole lot of outlets to try to unburden herself a little bit. So Sharon takes it upon herself to throw Victoria a girls' night. I just loved this idea so much. If Y&R had only given us this girls' night scene, that would have been enough for me. It was so empowered, and it's crazy to think back on it now about how it all started out so innocently and the way that it escalated little by little until it became something much larger. But back to Sharon for a second, because I think Y&R did a really good job of incorporating this Sharon 2.0 into what's going on with Victoria, because Y&R definitely could have dropped the whole crisis counseling psychology thing from Sharon's character and not given us that follow-up. But I think this was a really cool full circle moment for Sharon too. Earlier in the week, she had a run-in with Victoria before Victoria and JT had left town to go to Hawaii. And even though Victoria wasn't super receptive to it, Sharon had done a really good job of just trying to plant seeds with Victoria, suggesting that maybe it's not a good idea to center your life around a man. I should know. It's taken me 10 years to figure this out. When you put all of your eggs into the one basket of one man, you just end up losing yourself. So I loved that Sharon had a conscience, a self-consciousness enough to realize that about herself and to try to offer it as something that maybe would take root with Victoria. And it did. It really did. It was Sharon's suggestion that Victoria go to the counselor in the first place. So Sharon has really played an incredibly important role in all of this. And I was really very impressed with her. She tells Victoria, you know, maybe you need to find a way to focus on your own interests, even if it's just a class or a girls' night. And even though Victoria wasn't particularly interested in it, I do think that in the back of her mind, she was really hearing Sharon. It was creeping in. So I loved it when Sharon showed up at the coffee house with the bottle of tequila, all of the limes, and she tries to rope Mariah into just surprising Victoria with a margarita night. Let's give her an opportunity to unwind. Let's invite some other ladies. Oh, wait. Victoria doesn't really know any other ladies. Victoria doesn't really have any friends. That is so sad to me. But also, I take a little bit of comfort in thinking that Y&R is maybe putting us into a direction of more girlfriends. I think the show needs more girlfriends. This whole scene, the whole margarita scene, was just so much fun. It was so, like, therapeutic for me in a way. Sharon and Mariah end up inviting Nikki. She is the main and one of the only people they could really think of who would be close with Victoria. Sharon also coaxes Billy into making Phyllis come. So it was kind of a hodgepodge guest list that seemed so awkward at first, but as the scenes went on and thinking back on it now, I realized that everybody who was there had a very specific role to play, and they played it so well. I just found it so fun. I thought it was like this bizarre calm in the eye of the storm. I was rejuvenated by it. And I also felt like it was a great way for Y&R also to fold in the things that each of the other characters were going through too, and connecting it into the Victoria story. Nikki shows up at the party fresh off of her little meeting at the police station, which I'll talk about in a little bit. She was probably also digging her fingernails into her hand, watching everybody drink these delicious margaritas and relaxing, and she's a recovering alcoholic, so she couldn't do that. So I think that was probably very hard for her. She was in a den of temptation, and she navigated that pretty well. Phyllis also clearly did not want to be there, so she was extra saucy. She was throwing out the snarkiness left and right. She even made a little comment about Nikki and Victor's so-called perfect romance. And Nikki, it was pretty obvious what Phyllis was getting at. So Nikki said, "All right then, Phyllis, I'll tell you guys what you want to hear. Victor and I have an open relationship." How awkward for Victoria to have to hear, but it dropped on the room like a bomb. All of the girls were like, "What?" Mariah, who was drunk and fascinated by the story, says to Nikki, like, "How open is this relationship?" And Phyllis just snarks over to Mariah, like, "Wide open." It's like a wide open relationship. It was really very funny. I liked that sisterhood, you know, that just, I don't know, it was just so nice to let people stop keeping secrets and just be open about their secrets, because what's the big deal anyway? Even Mariah got in on the cathartic openness tone of the evening, and she confesses to everyone that she kissed a girl, and yeah, she liked it. It turned out to be a lie, though, a lie that felt so true, but at least she seized the day. At least she seized the day, and then she passed out. I fear for what's going to happen when Mariah comes back too. That's going to be a very rude awakening. But she's pretty good at usually helping people cover things up. So we'll see what happens with Mariah next week. Even Sharon and Phyllis were there saying some piece about Nick, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later too. It was just great to see everyone bonding in the weirdest of ways. But the entire time, Victoria was keeping silent. Like, she was feeling supportive by, you know, the fact that the women were there to help her, to help relax her. And she did admit to the fact that she and JT broke up, but she kept it really, really tight. She almost played it off as if it were no big deal, as if it was just a boyfriend that you'd been seeing for a couple months. We broke up, let's just have drinks. She had her business face on. Victoria had her PR face on. JT and I, we just didn't work out. We came to a mutual realization. And even though that wasn't the truth, even if Victoria was simply distracting herself from the truth, those margarita scenes, I could feel Victoria coming back to life. And then when JT showed up at the door, I could see all of that life just almost draining away from her. I could really see it visually, the way that JT was draining her. Like, every time she tried to make something better, every time she tried to get closer to happiness, he would call and then show up at the door, and a lot of that just that, you know, her happiness was being stolen from her. So when he came back to the house and showed up at the door, I wanted her to slam the door in his face, but she decides to give him court. She talks to him, and of course there's more excuses. Of course he wants to come crawling back. He's pleading his case, saying the same things that he's been saying. We just have too much passion to fit into a normal relationship. This is just who we are. And she, I think, also being bolstered a little bit by the women, said no. She just decided to say, no, I should have left you the moment you put your hands on my throat. She should have left him well before that, but it was such a good call nonetheless. She tells him to get the hell off her property, and she slams the door in his face. She goes back inside, and she's still trying really hard to keep it together. She hasn't told them that that was JT at the door or that he's been calling her. And again, PR face. But in the background, the women are still having a really good time, and they're still feeling bold. They've all had confessions. They've all had conversations. The truth has set them free. So Victoria just decides to let the truth set her free too. And she says out loud to the girls, for the very first time, admitting to herself for the very first time, JT abused me. We didn't just break up, he was abusing me. I just welled up instantly. As soon as she said that, I was in tears. I mean, my eyes just filled up. And I could feel that she felt so relieved, because I felt so relieved that she would say the words and that she was having this renaissance. And to admit to herself and to friends and to family to just let go and to give in and to just feel supported, to just like know that you're falling and that someone is there to catch you, that just felt so important. It felt like such a full circle moment for Victoria and for me. And then to listen to her explain herself, the questions that I've been asking, that we've been asking for all of these weeks, just to hear her talk about the process that she's been through, the fact that what happened with JT and the physical abuse and the emotional abuse, it didn't just happen overnight. every moment with them wasn't bad. There was good too, but it started out little and then it just grew larger and larger until the point where she didn't even realize that she was being manipulated, that he was always telling her that everything he did was out of love. It was in her best interest. And little by little, she just began to respect his judgment more than her own. That's what Sharon was warning of. And over time, things between, things with JT just became more and more severe until the point where she was covering up bruises. The way that Victoria was being so raw, and watching Nikki's reaction to seeing her daughter be so raw, the conversation was so intimate that there were points where I thought, maybe this should just be private. Maybe this should just be something between mother and daughter, because Victoria is not exactly close with Phyllis and Sharon. But actually, Phyllis and Sharon both really played important roles, probably mostly for the audience, but I really liked that those two people, those two women, were there specifically because they both represented different mindsets in a way. Phyllis has no experience with any type of physical or emotional or mental abuse. She's way on the outside of what this would ever look like because of her personality type. Phyllis just is, she's so fierce, and she is just, she could not wrap her brain around how something like this could happen, because it is hard to understand. If you haven't been touched by it at all and you consider yourself strong and smart, especially in relationships, it's hard to think of how someone, especially someone like Victoria, could ever let something like this happen. But then we had Sharon, who created that perfect balance with her domestic violence training and being someone who knows the signs and the symptoms of domestic abuse. Because when you add all of the stories up of all of the men and women who have been through something like this from all across the world, the themes are the same. You can start to see an aerial view of the problem, and blaming the victim can be a part of that problem too. Like looking at the victim and saying, why would you let this happen? So I think that it's something that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Everyone watching this story may think that it could never happen to them because you consider yourself so strong. But as Sharon said, you can't think that it would never happen to you, because the fact is you simply do not know what you would do in that situation. And it doesn't just go from 0 to 100. It's moving the needle bit by bit. So I just really, really appreciated the group, the crowd, the way that the conversation was represented. And then there was Nikki. Nikki's hearing her daughter tell her this truth. And now Nikki is filling the role of a mother who feels like she failed in protecting her daughter and kicking herself because Nikki knew that something was off with JT, and she tried to talk to him about it and she didn't do anything. I think Nikki was feeling guilty in these moments because she knew something was off and she didn't act on it. And also feeling crushed that Victoria didn't talk to her about it. You want to assume that you're so close, and the fact that Victoria didn't open up about it hurt Nikki. I thought that the mommy moments there were so important and so good, and I appreciated when Victoria went out to get some air just after having relived all of this. She needs a moment, and she goes out onto a bench outside under the stars, and Nikki comes to her and brings her a wrap, and they just sit there on the bench talking to one another, and Nikki trying to reinforce that Victoria's not weak. Victoria feels weak. She feels embarrassed. And those are all of the reasons why she didn't want to open up to Nikki about it, because she felt embarrassed. And Nikki is telling her, no, you are strong. The fact that you're here now and that you got away from this, that's what shows me that you're strong, that you are the person that I've always known and that I'm so proud of. And your father would be proud of. I thought it was also a very interesting tie-in that in the conversation, Nikki also related it to Victoria's primary example of how a relationship works, being her mother and father, Nikki and Victor, who have had a really rocky road. And I don't think any of us would necessarily, maybe there is someone out there who would classify Nikki and Victor's relationship as abusive. I wouldn't. I don't get that from them, but it certainly isn't healthy. And knowing that that's what Victoria views as normal maybe played into this a little bit. Maybe maybe her feelings toward her father and the way that he has controlled her life also made it easier for her to accept some of JT's behavior. I thought that was just an interesting tie-in. I mean, there's no, blaming or anything like that. But just all of that at least being folded into Victoria's personality. And I loved Nikki's advice. I think that Victoria was still wanting to know if there was any way to help JT. Because at the end of this, let's not forget that she still shares a child with the man. She still loves him so very much, even if things did go this way. The love doesn't disappear. That doesn't disappear. But Nikki's advice being, you cannot fix the darkness in JT. All you can do is walk away. If only it were that easy. Back inside, Victoria is upstairs in that fateful bathroom, washing her face in the same mirror that she used to cover the bruises. She's just trying to have a moment to herself. She drops the washcloth on the ground, bends over to pick it up, stands up, and sees JT's reflection in the mirror behind her. He's just come from a conversation with Kane that I think reinforced to me how out of touch with reality he is. JT was talking with Kane, but left under the impression that he was just going to go fight for a relationship. Go fight for his relationship. We've seen this many, many times. I'm going to fight for the person that I love. That's where JT's head is. I'm just going to go fight for the person that I love. He's completely rationalized the fact that he's broken into her house. Did you notice how he called it my house? I have to break into my own house. I can't believe I have to break into my own house. And he's standing there. Now he's the one who's begging and who's pleading to be taken back. He thinks that she owes him some kind of, or that she owes him the opportunity to explain himself, as if he hasn't been doing this over and over and over. Yet how good he had become at offering excuses and apologies. That's part of it. He was so good at offering excuses and apologies. she's done. At this point, Victoria is done. So they argue, and it's a lot of the same arguments that have been going on for months. He just doesn't get it. He refuses to see himself through anyone else's eyes. It's always someone else's fault. It's Victor's fault. He starts to recount the argument that he had with Victor before Victor went down the stairs. We all would have been better off if Victor would have just died in that fall. He says to her of her father. And suddenly it all makes sense to her. Just him talking about Victor and recounting this conversation that she didn't know he had. When did Victor say this to you? When did Victor say all these things to you? You did it. You pushed him down the stairs. It all makes sense. And he denies it at first. He denies it so convincingly. We know as the audience that he did it. And yet he's standing there lying. We're watching him lie some more. But a little bit by little bit, the truth starts to slip out. Oh, fine, okay, fine. I did it, but it was an accident. Even if it was an accident, you left him on the floor and you came home to me with champagne. You brought champagne. And then, well, if he would do this, what else would he do? You turned off the ventilator. It was you. You tried to kill him. You could kill a man. You could kill my father and then stand here and have champagne with me and tell me that you love me and want to marry me? You're a monster. And he realizes now he's not getting out of this. He's now confessed. He's not getting her back. Not this time anyway. So he flips that switch. It's like the way he goes from explaining himself and just trying to, I love you, baby, to flipping over to turning it on her and being so vicious. It blows my mind, saying, well, fine, I'm such a bad person and you love me, so what does that make you? Oh, I controlled you. From what I hear, you loved it when I controlled you. What is it about you, Victoria, then? Just the insidious way he was trying to manipulate her and trying to make her doubt herself even up until the end. But she realizes now the man's a murderer. So she tries to call the police. She goes for the phone. They struggle. He rips the phone out of her hands. He traps her in the room. He's not going to let her go anywhere. He raises up his hand and he hits her again, throwing her against the bed. She tries to get away. She runs up to a dresser. She's trapped. She's cornered. And he's right there in her face, banging on the dresser. Just, why are you doing this to me, Victoria? Why? Why are you doing this to me? Well, Nikki and Phyllis and Sharon are downstairs. They hear the commotion, so they rush upstairs. Nikki specifically sees this man. After everything she's just learned, she sees him now here again in the house, uninvited, harming her daughter. So she just does what I think any mother would do. She grabs the nearest thing she can find, which happens to be a fireplace poker, and she just raises it up, whacks JT, and he hits the floor. We didn't see where the impact was. I don't know if it was in the head. It would have to be, I imagine, in the head. I didn't see any blood in the scene, but he just goes down, and I don't see any way he's not dead. He's definitely dead. Definitely dead. And so this is what we're gonna have next week. I mean, the aftermath. The aftermath is probably going to be focused on Nikki and what she did. I can't see that Paul is going to press charges against Nikki. First of all, JT confessed to Victor's attempted murder. Victoria heard all of that. Victoria not only heard the confession, but Victor is going to back all of that up once he can talk or when someone questions him. Plus, we had Phyllis and Sharon there who can both attest to Victoria's account of the abuse in their relationship and the fact that he had broken into the house and to the fact that it was a self-defense situation. The only thing I hope, I just hope in all of this, I have no doubt that Nikki's gonna get away. I have no doubt that JT's dead. I have no doubt that Nikki's gonna be off the hook. I just hope there's not some kind of weird Weekend at Bernie's caper that we're watching next week on these girls trying to figure out how they're gonna hide the body. So Victor woke up and nobody bothered to stop by his hospital room and question him about who put him in the hospital, who might have tried to kill him. Not once, not one person stopped by to question him. What is Paul doing? Where is Paul? It was Nick who ended up catching the mystery woman we've been wondering about. There happens to be a beautiful, long, dark-haired woman wandering the halls around Victor's room, and Nick sees her, calls the police, and Paul does bring her in for questioning. Did anybody else notice that Victor kind of has a type? Immediately when I saw the woman, I thought it was Sabrina. Do you guys remember Victor's wife, Sabrina? I didn't piece together for me immediately that it was Helen, the lab, the brilliant head chemist that Jack hired for the Jabot lab. I didn't piece together that it was her. I honestly had a moment of thinking it was Sabrina back from the dead, but Paul brings her in for questioning, and of course it's revealed that she was at the hospital only to check on Victor because, yes, indeed, Victor and Nikki did have an open relationship that went both ways. She was having an affair with Victor, and it was that is his type. It's like he wants Nikki forever, but in the absence of Nikki, he seems to like a long, dark-haired beauty. Paul also was very inappropriate as Nikki comes down to the police station asking, well, who is this woman? Did she try to kill my husband? And Paul says, well, given the circumstances that you and Victor have an open relationship, here, why don't you meet the woman? She's not a murderer, she's his mistress. I can't believe he did that. Paul must have known I was waiting for the drama. the drama of that. Although it really was mostly mature. Nikki was not upset about finding out that this woman had been involved with Victor, because what's good for Mrs. Goose is also going to be good for Mr. Goose. She just, looks Helen up and down and offers her a little bit of wisdom. Just lets her know, I'm going to set it down sharply for you. I'm going to lay out what the situation is. I'm the love of Victor's life, okay? Jack is Victor's worst enemy, so it might do you good to think about where you fit into this picture. We had a margarita party this week. We had a pizza party this week. Both of those things sound like they just would be so excellent. I like it. Y&R is just doing such a good job right now. But I laughed a little bit at the idea of Kyle bringing a pizza over to just hang out with Dina. She was loving it. She loves the attention, especially from the men. But it was very interesting that, he was basically using the pizza to ply Dina for information. I really don't think he has any kind of genuine interest in getting to know his grandmother. That's at least not the vibe that I'm getting from him. I think it was just a continued manipulation, and he did almost learn the truth about this whole blood abbot clause on his own. Dina starts talking about this mystery man that she was meeting with in the hotel, and it really wouldn't have taken too much longer before Kyle could have pieced together the fact that there was an affair, and he may very well not even be a blood abbot either. I really do enjoy this new Kyle. I think it feels like a classic style of Y&R storytelling. I did like the surprise of Kyle going to visit Victor in the hospital, and although Victor can't really respond, we did have Kyle reveal his whole plan for Jabot and his usurping the chair. What he wants to do is take Jabot public. He wants to offer up stocks for anyone in the world to buy, but the only one who is going to be buying those stocks are he and Victor. It, of course, is a throwback to the very classic storyline where Jack took Jabot public for the first time. John was against it, but Jack decided it would be great for the company. You know, this was his big forward momentum way to take Jabot to the next level, and it was Victor who swooped in, bought up the majority shares, and robbed Jabot of the Abbott family for a number of years. Victor owned Jabot for a long time. It really has only been, I mean, it really wasn't that long ago that Jack even got the company back. So do you guys remember that storyline? I loved it. I thought that was great. It was heartbreaking, and it was really at the root of Jack, the beginning, I suppose, of the root of Jack feeling like he did a disservice to his father, like he would have disappointed his father, and it hurt John. John was alive for all of this, so it was very shameful for Jack, and I think it's an interesting idea to let play out now in light of the whole paternity thing, and we'll see where it goes. Kyle is quietly gathering board seats to have a vote to decide whether or not to take the company public. I was a little surprised at how quickly Lauren jumped on board with Kyle's idea. She really seemed impressed by him, and it was just all music to her ears, because if Jabot goes public, then she will have an opportunity to make some money and buy back her company. That's her family company that she felt forced to take on investors for, and she doesn't really like allowing Jack and Jabot to call the shots when it comes to her company. So she's looking forward to this opportunity. The rub, though, is the fact that Lauren is making Phyllis choose now. I remember Phyllis works for Fenmore's, but she also has a board seat at Jabot. So now that Lauren is on board with this plan, she tells Phyllis she better get on board with this plan too if she wants to keep her job. I cannot see Phyllis giving in to Lauren's pressure. That just doesn't seem very Phyllis-like. I could almost just more see Phyllis calling Lauren's bluff, maybe deciding to quit. Like, the thing is, Phyllis's board seat and her job at Fenmore's are two entirely different things. They're not connected in any way. So I just can't see Phyllis giving into that pressure. I could more see her deciding to quit, maybe go work at Jabot, maybe try to fight Kyle's fire with fire if there's a way that she could get a job there. But now that Victor's awake, surely this has to sort of be moot, right? Jack will not be held in jail for much longer, right? It's only got to be a matter of time. Last week, I asked you guys, do you think that Ashley should expose Jack's paternity test results? 66% of you were in favor of seeing those paternity test results brought to light. I mean, how much do you want to bet that board vote is going to happen. That board vote is going to be at noon. Ashley's going to come in there and drop this big old bomb about Jack's secret paternity at 12:01, and then Jack's going to get released from jail at 12:02. Nick and Billy are both going to hit the roof when they learn what JT did to Victoria. Nick is very lost right now. I mean, he is really struggling to move on in a post-Chelsea universe. He has just gone through everything with learning Christian's paternity, and then his father's in the hospital. Nick is really struggling to keep it together right now, and whether they realize it or not, Sharon and Phyllis are both vying for the right to nurse all of Nick's boo-boos. The only difference is that Sharon's method is meatloaf and Phyllis's method is beer and video games. They're two very different approaches, but both of them have worked when trying to get Nick's heart. This week, though, I think Nick appreciated the beer and video games idea a little bit more. He goes over to Phyllis's house. Phyllis has begged Billy to let Nick hang a little bit. Hey, this is a friend. We need to help him. He's going through something, so let's all three just sit here and have a good time. Sharon ended up breaking up the party because Nikki was trying to get a hold of Nick to give him news about Victor, and Sharon was really giving me mom vibe. It came off as a little bit overbearing, like she was coming over to Nick's friend's house to drag him out by his collar. And I don't think that was a very attractive look on Sharon, and that's part of the reason why I was also kind of happy to see her decide to go out on a date. We saw Sharon using a dating app and arranging a meeting with some guy, apparently a CPA. I want to see this sexy CPA. I wouldn't have minded seeing the date. Sharon looked beautiful for it. She was glowing. But at the end of the day, dating's hard. It was not a love match. He was no Nick. What she really wants is Nick. She wants the life with Nick, and she has probably wanted that for a very long time. It was never her. It wasn't her that broke off the last wedding. It was him. And so I kind of felt like, hey, even if the date didn't work out, there's nothing wrong with showing Nick what he's missing, and it worked. It bothered Nick to see Sharon go out on a date, and I don't think he expected to have that feeling. This whole thing, this whole living arrangement was just supposed to just be an arrangement. They were just supposed to be just living together, and now here he's realizing that he has opinions about how she's living her life, and he doesn't exactly like the idea of her going out on the town with other men. So he goes to Phyllis to talk about all of this. I found that to be really surprising. Of all of the people in the world, he goes to Phyllis and confides in her that he's having these feelings for Sharon. Why? Phyllis has been very clear what side of the fence she's on, that she doesn't want Nick involved with Sharon. She doesn't even want him living there. So why would he think that she was going to give him any kind of neutral advice unless he wanted the advice to stay away from Sharon? And Phyllis gave him that. She really planted a vicious little seed about Sharon, saying, well, I think it was something to the effect of, well, are you sure that Sharon really wants you, or is she just trying to get caught up in this, in reliving the fantasy of believing that Sully slash Christian is her son? That seemed so very uncalled for and really off the mark. I suppose that Phyllis was just trying to say or do anything to keep Nick away from Sharon, but I'm not exactly sure why. This feels like a situation that Phyllis doesn't need to get involved in. Busting Kyle out of Jabot, yeah, you're in a unique position to help out with that. But Nick's a big boy. It just doesn't seem like she needs to get involved in this. What's in it for her besides potentially destroying her relationship with Billy? That's what the effect of this is going to be. Billy is starting to notice that Phyllis is taking way too much of an interest in Nick's life. In fact, he was noticing it weeks ago. But he ends up actually going to Sharon and trying to talk to her about this whole thing. You know, his doubt is starting to creep in, and he is noticing the way that Nick and Phyllis are bonding, and he feels like Sharon is someone to talk to about it. And Sharon, in the same way, really didn't ease, in the same way that Phyllis didn't ease Nick's mind, Sharon didn't ease Billy's mind. She let him know that, yeah, beer and video games is kind of what destroyed my marriage. You know, Nick and Phyllis want to sit there playing video games, but it ends up in them making out. It ends up in them getting back together. This is how they deal with their problems. You know, when I was struggling in my marriage with Nick after the loss of our daughter, he preferred to be playing video games with Phyllis instead of dealing with what was really going on at home. So this is a dangerous pattern for them. Sharon knows it. Now Billy knows it. And I got a bad feeling here. I think Billy and Phyllis are going to be caught up in a couple of different messes if they're on top of all of this, dealing with everything that's going on with Jabot. For Phyllis, maybe some easygoing game nights with Nick might start to look mighty appealing. I wish that Devon would just accept Hillary for who she is and stop trying to make her something that she's not. With Hillary, at least what you see is kind of what you get, and he seems like he's always in denial about that. He's mad at her, of course, for busting him out to Simone about their baby making project before he had a chance to tell her. And he's mad at Hillary. She kind of assumes, of course, that he's going to forgive her. But he has a moment of realizing that he doesn't want a lifetime of dealing with these types of stunts. He decides to call off the whole project, even acknowledges the cycle of their relationship, that Hillary does something bad and then he gets mad and then he forgives her after she gives a heartfelt explanation and apology. And according to him, this time he's done repeating that cycle. He tells her there will be no more baby making the old-fashioned way or in the lab. There's no way that he's having a child with her unless she's pregnant already. Lightning bolts of retribution. Weird line, but it was Phyllis who said that last week. She was having a conversation with Nick, and she was commenting on Victor being in the hospital and the fact that he was going to be fine, which we all knew. She said that Victor is going to levitate up off the bed, shooting lightning bolts of retribution, and then he's going to wax his mustache. It was just kind of a funny little moment. A couple of you guessed that it was Phyllis who said it. Henry, as always, gets it right every week. Congratulations. Plus, Anne Breen's been on a streak too. And Gina, I miss you, Gina. We also have Joanne, nice one. Diana and Beatrice. Very good, you guys. I picked a quote this week that just, I don't know, just seemed to sum up the week a little bit. How about this? Honesty can be a bitch sometimes. I think that summed up pretty well. Honesty can be a bitch sometimes. Do you think you know who said it? If you do, go on over to yrchat.com to leave your guess, and if you get it right, then I will give you your congratulations on next week's chat. I'm just so pleased with all of the thoughtful comments that I've gotten throughout the course of this past week. So let's crack open this Chatterbox. Robbie says, this abuse storyline really could have fallen apart, but it didn't. In fact, Friday's episode reminded me why I love this show so much. Sandra says Y&R has been better than ever lately. The abuse storyline was hard to watch, and even harder having the abuser be JT. How very sad for the character of JT, but Friday's episode was worth it. I watched it with such intensity, I barely reacted. And then I watched it again, and I was brought to tears listening to Victoria recant her perception of her relationship with JT. The whole show was gut-wrenching. I wanted to mention also the way that Sharon repeated, you just don't know how you would react in this situation. It was wasted on Phyllis, as we all know. Phyllis would have done exactly what she said she was going to do, bop the guy over the head or knee him in the groin. But I think this comment was aimed toward the viewing public as a note to not be judgmental of people in an abuse situation. Nikki's face, as Victoria described what she'd been through, said 10,000 words in an instant. I could feel the depth of Nikki's pain while she listened to the harm her daughter endured. Just amazing performances by everyone on the show this week. I agree, Sandra. I watched the episode twice, too. The first time I watched it, I think I was just in shock. On my initial viewing, I ended the episode eyes wide open. My hands, both hands were covering my mouth, and I was crying. It was just so shocking to me. Like especially when he hit her again, I was just, I felt it. I felt it. I watched it twice, and I don't think it really, sunk in. I was just in shock. And then I watched the episode again, and then really was able to absorb the things that Victoria was saying, and what Sharon was saying. I like that he brought up the fact that Sharon was trying to represent the idea that it's not just like weak people that this is happening to. You can't just categorize it that way and write it off as, well, the victims are weak and so we can't pay attention to this. No, I think that Sharon and Phyllis being there really helped drag to light and really helped make the conversation so much more relevant. I agree. It was just so, it's just, I can't say enough good things about it too. Jamie had a very interesting opportunity to watch Friday's episode with her daughter and with her husband. And Jamie was really moved by her husband's reaction. Just the fact that he was disgusted about JT and his actions and how he could possibly do this. And it's just such an important topic to be brought up, Jamie notes, because it's not just the women watching this who are seeing it, or a victim seeing it, but the fact that men could be watching this too and connecting with it. I just totally agree. It's not something that is just even educational for women. It's not even just educational for potential victims or anyone who's in this situation. I think that the way this storyline was presented has such a much broader appeal. And this is a completely opposite situation from what you were saying, Jamie, but it also occurred to me this week that seeing this type of story could open up the eyes not only of someone who's being abused, but what about someone who is maybe abusing? Like maybe someone watched this show and saw similarities between JT's behavior and their own behavior. In that way, I just think it's been so successful. It's had such a broad appeal. I mean, Jamie was saying, my husband's not even a fan of soaps. He's not even a fan of Y&R. And he just happened to watch the show and saw it and absorbed it and felt about it. And I just think, that's the measuring stick of a good show. Ellen says, I wish that more stories showed the abuser getting help. We will never solve domestic violence, child abuse, and other crimes that no one wants to talk about unless we find a way to stop the abuse from happening. When Victoria says, if it weren't for Reed, I would forget I ever knew you. Is that right? Do we throw people away when they make horrible mistakes? When does the cycle end then? And when do we learn how to stop abusive patterns in their tracks? Oh, Ellen, I'm so glad you said this because I agree. I agree entirely. Y&R took us right to the brink with this one, and I just feel like it's a little bit of a steep drop off the cliff. as far as opportunities to really educate. I mean, I'm not even normally that big into storylines that come off like a public service announcement. That's not me. I don't even like necessarily issues-based, in quotes, storylines, but it had such an appeal. It was so broad, and it was just so well done that it does feel like there was such a large gap in the understanding of the abuser's mentality. And I mean, that's the thing, we really dug into Victoria's character this week. We really got to understand where she was coming from and the ways that the abuse insidiously creeped into her life. But I just, it's not realistic to think that, these abusers just go away. I mean, there's just so much more education that I think that could have been done. I mean, if they did such a good job with part 1, and I feel like we're missing an opportunity for part 2. Erica says, why are they covering this incident up? It was self-defense. Erica's commenting there on that little preview that we saw for Monday, showing it seemed like the women were now scrambling. JT's been hit over the head, and now they're scrambling. And Erica says, why are they covering this up? It was self-defense. Well, I totally agree. But also Superplex noting here, is Y&R resuming the sneak previews out of viewer response? So yes, until you said that, Superplex, I didn't even register it. Honestly, I've just been so floored and thrown back by this whole story that I didn't even notice that they did do they said next week on Y&R. I wonder, is that going to be every day now? They did previews and the recap at the beginning of the episode too. So I wonder, is that a sign of things to come, or was it just maybe like a very special welcome to a very special episode of Y&R? Maybe they only did that because this was so striking, and normally we don't get episodes that are centered around a single story. That was another unique thing about Friday, was it was all taking place at the house. It was one story. We didn't check in with any other stories that day. So I don't know if it's an all the time thing or just this time thing. But Gary says, I'm just grateful that things went down the way they did without Y&R giving us a bump someone off mystery. We saw what happened. We know who the culprit is. I don't want to play guessing games. Those are the most tedious and uninteresting stories. Yeah, I agree. A whodunit with JT would have been bad, and I think it also would have been bad if Victoria would have been the one to do it. I think it was a smart choice to make Nikki the assailant. Who's gonna blame her anyway? She's killed before. Oh, Laura says, ugh, why couldn't Paul visit Victor in the hospital room with that tablet and ask Victor, who did you fight with at the ranch and who turned off the hospital equipment? I hate to say it, but Genoa City PD needs to sharpen their wits. Bumbling fools for the sake of drawing out the storyline is frustrating to watch. We need a hero move. Go, Paul. I mean, first of all, Laura, yeah. If Victor had to go out of his way to get the tablet and to tell people to write out JT on the tablet, why wasn't anyone prompting him? That makes no sense. And I agree also that, like much like Gary said, like these long drawn out whodunits are tedious and uninteresting. As you say, Laura, it's like police mysteries or easily solvable crimes that the police just bumble around and don't follow up on are equally as tedious and frustrating. Daisy says, I don't like Ashley being in charge of Newman Enterprises. It's very difficult to believe that there's no one else available but her. I also think that in a sense, Ashley did to Victoria what Jack did to her. What's going on at Newman Enterprises right now is strikingly similar to what's going on at Jabot. And the way you mentioned that, Daisy, about why didn't somebody else step in? Why didn't Nick step in? Or why didn't even Nikki step in? Why was there no other family member that was available to take over the company the way that Billy and Kyle and Ashley and Abby, or, you know, they were all willing to step up and take the helm? That wasn't really the case at Newman Enterprises. And also, it's just Ashley being at Newman has never made sense to me from day one. I wish that wasn't going to be the case, but I think she's going to stay there. It'll be interesting to see what the interaction between Ashley and Victoria will continue to be. It's going to be a bad look on Ashley if she starts to rub anything in Victoria's face, especially right now. Oh, we had some comments about the poll question from last week, if you wanted to see Ashley exposing those paternity test results. And Beatrice says, I'm totally against that taking place. I feel that Dina has her own challenges with her health right now, and like exploiting that situation is not right. I know, Beatrice, and I don't think we can trust it anyway. I think that they're hanging a lot on Dina's story. And it's the story of someone who cannot recall. And then the paternity test results really could swing either way between Jack and Tracy. The only thing it proves is that Jack and Tracy aren't related. And who knows, there could have been a lab blip. I just don't believe it. Astra says, I would hate to see what the paternity results being revealed would do to Jack, but for me, smug Kyle getting knocked down a few pegs is a must-see. Agreed on that point. I would like to see him get knocked down. Mary Ann says, I think Kyle is a shrewd way for producers and writers to distract viewers from the question about when is Adam coming back. It's much easier to recast a character who's been played by 3 less memorable actors over a 4 or 5 year period than a character who was played by 2 equally memorable and popular actors over several years. The character is more Adam 2.0 than Noah or Nick 2.0. Yeah. Marianne also says, I would love a month of Tracy and Billy as co-CEOs. Tracy, wisdom, Billy, risk-taking. It could be interesting for a month. Tracy's writing background could be an asset for PR, and Billy is currently likable without being as immature as he is over the last couple years. Yeah! Ooh, Tracy and Billy would be good co-CEOs. Diana says, who knew Mariah was so good at making margaritas? It was very refreshing to see those characters opening up, especially Mariah confessing to kissing a girl and Nikki letting out about her and Victor's open marriage. I noticed that Sharon never came clean about her feelings for Nick. I think Sharon may have confessed if Phyllis wasn't there. That is a very good note. Oh, and we have T. Nicole saying it would be awesome to also see guys' nights and get humor from all the boys getting together. Plus, it might also be fun for the actors to do group scenes where there's not always a fancy party. They can do comedy and also get women supporting women and men supporting men. I totally agree, T. Nicole. Do you remember we've had a couple of times where like the guys would get together for a poker party or something like that. I liked that. Stuff like that is really fun. It's good to see these characters coming together, sharing some scenes, and even though we love all our drama, it's also nice to see them getting along for a change. Okay, everybody, that is my last call for the week. I hope that you guys really dug into and appreciated this week's Y&R in the same way that I did. I'm feeling a little under the weather. I probably should have mentioned that from the beginning. I knew I wasn't going to be able to give high energy here, but I also didn't feel... I feel like the whole story wasn't high energy, so maybe my tone of seriousness is both matching the story and also it's because I'm a little bit blah. But I really can't wait for next week. I'm just so pleased with Y&R right now, and I can tell that we have had some new chatters coming in and finding us, and I think that's another signal of the show being really good right now. People are liking it so much that they're going online and just wanting to find what other people's opinions are. So that's where you guys come in too. Leave those opinions. yrchat.com. I want to know your comments. There's nothing, that you're thinking that you can't say. So go there, leave your comments, and I will pick some and bring them back, and we'll chat about them next week. Okay, I love you guys. Be good to yourselves, be good to others, and enjoy the show. Okay, bye.